But you don't keep doing this. This is just gonna cause like more eyes on the Brooklyn Nets, and for the bad reasons. And I just think it just gives him a sense of entitlement. Doing media is part of your duty as an NBA player. It's in your contract. Hello and welcome to the Friday, December 18th edition of the TV on Basketball podcast with your host, TV. Hope you're all having a fantastic day, and thank you for clicking onto this video to watch or listen if you're on any of the podcast networks. Before we start, I have to plug my other platforms. Remember to follow at TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for updates on the podcast and for other content. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell on. That would be very much appreciated. And for all the podcast listeners, remember to subscribe and leave a review if you're on Apple. As for Spotify, Anchor, or Podbean listeners, continue to show your support in any way possible. I have a great show lined up for you today. I'm going to be talking about some current NBA topics, which will be mixed in with the bigger topic of this video, which is my Eastern Conference predictions. Just like I did a week and a half ago with the West, I'm going to be doing the same for the East, and this one's going to be very interesting as well. So if you're excited for this episode, remember to, like I said, show your support, and we have a long episode ahead, so let's get right into it. We're going to start off at the bottom of the East, in my opinion, and we're going to start with the 15th seed. And at the 15th seed, I have the Detroit Pistons. I think they're going to finish with a record of 18-54. Their MVP is going to be Blake Griffin. Their player to watch being Killian Hayes. I mean, there's not much to like about this team. I mean, they have an injury-riddled Blake Griffin who has barely played over the last 2 years. Derrick Rose, we already know his injury issues. They have a bunch of just, centers that no one really wants. I mean, they signed Mason Plumlee to a pretty big deal, and then also brought in Jahlil Okafor. And they just haven't had a really good offseason. My only positive note that they had was they drafted Killian Hayes, who I'm a big fan of. A big point guard who can take it to the rim, who's not overly athletic, but who can possibly have the skills of a true point guard. Especially with Derrick Rose being his mentor, I think that could be very helpful for him. But I think that they're not going to be they're not going to be fighting for anything. Let's be completely honest. They also signed Jeremy Grant to that 3-year, $60 million contract, and he's been kind of rough in preseason, so you can see where that money's going to. But at the same time, I think they want to tank. I think they should want to tank. They're going to have to get rid of Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose eventually, in my opinion, especially just try to get as much value as you can back in terms of assets, in terms of young players. But right now, it seems kind of rough at the moment for the Pistons, but at least they have one small building block there and Killian Hayes. Let's move on to number 14th in the East, and we're going to be talking about the New York Knicks. I have them finishing 14th in the East, 21-51 on the season. Their most valuable player being R.J. Barrett, and their player to watch being Mitchell Robinson. I think this team still has a lot of question marks. I mean, we talk about Mitchell Robinson as this good player, but the thing is, he hasn't started in the last 2 years, mostly because of the fact that he can't get out of foul trouble. He's been averaging over 3 fouls a game throughout his career. And although he is a good rim protector, on the face of things, if he jumps all the time, if he doesn't have the defensive prowess, what's the word I'm looking for? The discipline. There you go. The defensive discipline. Then they're gonna be forced to take him off the court and use someone like they've been using in preseason, Nerlens Noel. I mean, it's been kind of rough. I mean, I'm a big fan of Mitchell Robinson. I am. I have him on my fantasy team. I want him to do well, but in order for him to stay on the court, he needs to really work on that fouling issues. I really don't my only thing is that I put R.J. Barrett as their most valuable player is because he's the one that they drafted really high in last year's draft, and if they're gonna have some form of success, R.J. Barrett needs to take that next step. Last year, 14 points on 40% shooting was okay, not the best. But now they're bringing Obi Toppin to help out with the scoring, and hopefully that can kind of ease off the load for RJ Barrett, and he can also improve in that sense. So hopefully that would be great. And if the Knicks were to be bad like they have been for the last few years, maybe this year they could finally win out in the lottery and get like a very high pick and draft one of those top guys, like a Jalen Green, a Cade Cunningham for next year. But right now, it still doesn't look very promising. I mean, all you really just want to see is just some sort of improvement, some sort of bright spot going into next season. And if RJ Barrett can, up his scoring outlook, Mitchell Robinson, fix out his foul issues and actually like be a consistent starter by the end of the season, then I think that's a W for them. I really do think that's a W for them. So, yeah, you just have to hope for some positive Knicks fans because you may be bad this year, but if you can get a first round pick and still show some promise, I think that's a W of a season. We move on to number 13th on my rankings, and I have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like I said, have them 13th in the East, 25-47 as their projected record. Their MVP is Colin Sexton, and their player to watch is Darius Garland. I'm not a huge fan of this team, but I think that they have kind of a nice young group of guys that, if they show out, if they grow together, maybe they can be something in the future. Hopefully, I mean Sexton's probably gonna have like the number one scoring role. Hopefully, he can eclipse 20 points per game again next season, and actually like show that could be a pretty solid point guard. I would like to see some improvement from Darius Garland as well, who was statistically one of the worst rookies last week in terms of just with the amount of minutes he's playing and the production he was giving out. It was a pretty rough season, especially on the advanced analytics. But I do like some of the players that they have. I mean, I've been a big fan of Kevin Porter Jr. From last year. Hopefully he can get some time. They also brought in Isaac Okoro, who, if you guys have been watching the preseason, he had that nice defensive play and led to a game-winning layup. So, if he can become like, a defensive stalwart, a defensive anchor for their team, that could be extremely useful. My only issue with them is that they still have to get rid of Kevin Love. I don't know what's taking them so long. Maybe there's just not a lot of suitors, especially on that big contract. But at the same time, there's some young guys that, give them some time, and hopefully they can, just grow together and, give, Cleveland fans some hope going forward. So I'd just like the Knicks just show some promise, show some improvement, and maybe you can just build off that over the next few years because they're probably going to be back in the lottery, but they're still building their team. They're still in rebuilding mode, so hopefully they can get better. We move on to number 12 in the East, and we will be talking about the Chicago Bulls. I have their MVP being Zach LaVine, and their player to watch being Patrick Williams. I think the biggest offseason move that they made here was was changing their management and their head coach. Jim Boylan was trash last year. That whole working these guys out until like they get it didn't work out. Their management that's been the same for the past how many decades, they haven't done them any favors. They bring in Karnisovas from the Denver Nuggets system, and they also brought in Billy Donovan to help out their coaching. Yes, they didn't make many moves in the offseason. I mean, they drafted Patrick Williams, which many people, including myself, were very skeptical of. But if they see something in him, hopefully he can turn to that player they hope he could be. But it just doesn't look. I mean, it still just doesn't look great for them. I mean, Zach LaVine is probably going to average 26 points a game this season. I don't know how to fit with Kobe White's going to work. I mean, Kobe White, kind of like Zach LaVine, they're score first guards, and they might just get into each other's way. I mean, none of them are like, both of them are like their calling card is not passing. That's the thing, and they're going to need some of that. I mean, they have Satoransky off their bench, but you're going to have to like kind of stagger their minutes away from each other so they can get the most out of all of them. But at the same time, I just don't think just looking up and down the roster, it just might be just another one of those on the outside looking in type of years for the Chicago Bulls. If they can show some improvement, I mean, hopefully Lauri Markkanen and you can get him happy and maybe he can be more engaged than he was last year. Hopefully Wendell Carter could stop shooting threes, and hope that the Bulls find some sort of continuity, some sort of how do I want to say it, just camaraderie, and hopefully they could just use this as like a stepping stone to kind of bigger things in the future. So because they have LaVine on there for a few more years, And they still have to develop all these young guys. So hopefully it all works out. Let's see what the Bulls are going to do this year. But yeah, I don't have much expectations for the Bulls this upcoming year. Let's go on to the my 11th team in the East, and we're going to be talking about the Charlotte Hornets. I have them going 30 and 42. I have their MVP being Devonte Graham and their player to watch to be LaMelo Ball. Now this team is interesting because I've seen them a couple of times this preseason because they had to face my Toronto Raptors, and they have these bursts of excitement. I mean, LaMelo Ball makes his team a lot more fun to watch. Hayward, although he has some problems with his, I think his fifth ring, his fifth finger. I don't know. I know he has a game time decision for the next preseason game, but yeah, I mean, he's showing that he can be a pretty solid player for them. Devonte Graham, he's still an exciting young guard. Terry Rozier was hitting a couple shots, but it's just inconsistent in my opinion. I mean, they were being outdone. I mean, some of their stars were being outdone by the Raptors, bench unit, getting killed by people like Malachi Flynn. And that's like one of my issues with this team. They just do not have a good defense. They don't. Terry Rozier, Devonte Graham, Gordon Hayward, LaMelo Ball, none of their calling cards is defense. And those are all perimeter players. So I think that's something to be like really watch out for this team. Even on the inside, I mean, I'm still like not convinced that Cody Zeller is going to do them any good, like do them like any favors this year, especially like defending on the interior. But I think this team is just gonna be fun to watch, just because their offense is gonna be styling and profiling, and you just have a lot of guys who you know want to attack the rim, a la Miles Bridges, people who like to hit the three, which is like most of their backcourt, and just LaMelo Ball, which is gonna be make it interesting. But if if they play up to their potential, I could see them maybe getting into a play-in game, maybe. But at the same time, I think there's just way too many question marks to put them above 11th. So, yeah, in my 11th place, I have the Charlotte Hornets. The Orlando Magic I have coming in at number 10 in the East this offseason, in this upcoming season. I have them going 33 and 39. Nikola Vucevic, I have as their most valuable player, and the player to watch is Chuma Okiki. Is it just me, or is the Magic just okay with being mediocre? I mean, it's rough out here for Orlando Magic fans. I mean, they barely made moves this offseason. But I think if there's one thing they should be happy about is their 16th pick from last year, Chuma Okiki, who made his name in March Madness, finally returns from injury, and hopefully he could show up for them and actually like have a role on that team. I can see them making an upset on this play-in tournament just because they always kind of go under the radar. And as seen through the last 2 years, I mean, they took one game off the NBA champion Toronto Raptors, and they took one game off the number one seeded Milwaukee Bucks last year, and they were just competitive. I think this team will just stay competitive, but at the same time, especially at the end of the games, like who's taking the last shot. I really don't trust anyone on that team, and their best player being Vucevic and Aaron Gordon. I mean, they haven't shown like much success or improvement over the last few seasons to make me say that the Orlando Magic are going to be better than what they are, because they're not. They're just not. I think it's going to be interesting backcourt competition with Cole Anthony and Markelle Fultz. We still don't know when Terrence Ross is going to be back from injury. And like I said, Chuma Okiki, hopefully he can come back, show that he could be like a nice swing player for them. And, hopefully the Orlando Magic kind of like show us a little like time, some sort of improvement, especially from Aaron Gordon, who we were expecting some big things out of him, and he kind of has plateaued. And it's also not going to help the Orlando Magic that Jonathan Isaac is probably going to be injured for the remainder of the year. Let's be honest, but it's just I think it's going to be a really interesting team. And you shouldn't really expect less than ninth at best, maybe, but I have them 10th. So yeah, the Orlando Magic probably going to stay mediocre. I have them coming 10th in the East. Now let's move on to the ninth place team in the East, and I think this is going to kind of annoy some people, especially because this team has garnered a lot of fans after this free agency period, this off-season period. I'm going to be having the Atlanta Hawks at number 9, man. I have them going 37 and 35, their MVP being Trae Young, and their player to watch being John Collins. Now, don't let this ranking like fool you. If things go well for them, I can see them going as high as the 6th or 5th seed in the East. just because if everything falls in place. But at the same time, there's just so many question marks on this team. I mean, there's lots of bodies. I think that's like the big thing with this Atlanta Hawks team. There's just a lot of bodies and a lot of like talented pieces. But how is the fit? How is the fit gonna work? I'm not gonna go deeply into this because I've been talking about the Atlanta Hawks a lot throughout the offseason. But I mean, that front court is just so loaded. I mean, you have Gallinari, Hunter, Collins, Okongwu, Capella. It's just a very crowded roster at the moment, and I'm like, how are they gonna allocate these minutes to everyone, and who's gonna like suffer because of that? Because John Collins is going into a contract year, and if you listen to me in my other podcasts, a lot of people have that sense that he's not in the future plans for the Atlanta Hawks because he's probably not worth the max, and he's gonna be wanting the max this offseason. So it's definitely gonna be an interesting team. And hopefully, if they get ninth or eighth seed, I think that's a really successful season for the Atlanta Hawks. But if they do disappoint, if they do not come close to that, I could really see someone like Lloyd Pierce being on the hot seat this off season, this season if things don't go well. But I mean, this all I have to say about the team is like it's talented, but how is it all going to work out? Especially because the East is kind of loaded this year, in terms of like I think there are like 7 locks in the East of making the playoffs, so it's gonna be some tough competition for them. But I have them just outside the initial playoff spot. So number 9th, I have the Atlanta Hawks. Let's move on to number 8, and we're gonna be talking about the Washington Wizards. I have their most valuable player being Bradley Beal, and their player to watch being Denny Avdia, and I see them having a 40-32 record. I would never doubt Westbrook, honestly, making the playoffs. And like I said, like throughout this offseason, he is someone that raises your floor. Does he raise your ceiling? Probably not, but he raises your floor, and that's what you're gonna expect with this team. I think just because on Westbrook and Beal's talent, mostly because of Westbrook's heart, they're gonna make the playoffs. They are, and what I like about this team is like there's some like interesting pieces around them. I mean, you have Denny Avdia, who whether he starts or not, I think will be a pretty good player for this team. You have Rui Hachimura, who's going to be interesting to see like how he fits as kind of the third scorer on this team. And like I said, I just think that Beal and Westbrook are probably going to average like over 55 points a game combined. And I think that's just them together, just leading this team will just be enough, honestly. And because, they're, veteran type players compared to the Hawks who are led by Trae Young and John Collins, I think this is a lot better, like, kind of like a more, how do I say it? You know what to expect. You just kind of know what to expect when you have a Russell Westbrook team. He's just gonna he's gonna try his best. He's gonna like really like with all his heart just try and get you into the playoffs. And I think that's what's gonna happen this year. Now it's gonna be interesting to see how Bradley Beal's role kind of changes. Let's see how they're gonna like work together. And kind of that center position is kind of iffy as well with Thomas Bryant and Robin Lopez backing him up. But at the same time, I think just Westbrook and Beal are just good enough. They're just good enough to make the playoffs, and I think they're just going to make it off those two guys alone. So, 8th place in the East, I have the Washington Wizards. Let's move on to number 7th, and I think that this team is kind of being slept on. I've seen some people like taking them out of the playoff race, which is kind of mind-boggling to me, just because they basically have the same roster as last year, and they were like a 5th seed. I really don't think they're gonna like miss out on the playoffs again, just because they have that continuity as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't know who I'm talking about the Indiana Pacers. Like I said, 7th in the East, 43-29 record I project for them. Their most valuable player being Domantas Sabonis, and their player to watch being Miles Turner. Like I said, I just don't know why people don't have them as a playoff lock. I mean, they still have a good team with, Brogdon, Oladipo, Warren, Sabonis, and Turner. And if healthy, that roster, I mean, that starting 5 is pretty damn good. And they have good coaching that they added in Nate Bjorkgren as well. I mean, like I said, they haven't made a major change this year, but a healthy Oladipo is always going to be an upgrade. And Sabonis being like playing at an all-star level will help them a lot. And I just think that this team is just going to be solid. Just plain and simple. I think this team is going to be solid. They still have a pretty nice bench with McDermott, Jeremy Lamb, who's coming off an ACL injury, the Holiday brothers as well. I think this team is just going to be solid, and they're just going to make it. May not make it out the first round, but I just think they're just going to be solid enough to make it into the playoffs. One of my biggest questions is why they didn't get rid of Miles Turner, just because that whole dynamic with him and Sabonis hasn't been super effective over the last few years. But I guess they're trying to make it work one more time, and also it's because of Danny Ainge's stupidity for wanting Turner and Oladipo in that trade, which kind of mind boggles me. But yeah, that's it. That was kind of stupid in my opinion. But they still have him. Hopefully they can figure it out this year. But at the same time, even if they don't, I mean they're probably just going to be in the same position as they are like every year. Probably 5 to 7 seed, possible first round exit. That's really what it comes down to. So yeah, I have the Indiana Pacers coming in seventh. Let's talk about the number 6 team, and let's talk about my Toronto Raptors. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack if any of my Toronto listeners are listening to this, but I have them coming sixth in the East. I still have them having a good record though, 45-27. Most valuable player being Kyle Lowry, and the player to watch this year being OG Anunoby. But maybe add Malachi Flynn to that list because I've been loving the way he's been playing. I just think that although like I just think that those two losses at center, Gasol and Ibaka, are really gonna hurt the Raptors. Sure, Baines is okay. Hopefully, Boucher can like come into his own as a backup. But I just think that those two losses are kind of detrimental, especially with the East being as good as as great as it is this year. I just think the Raptors just do not have enough talent to kind of like compete with the top teams. But they could surprise me. I mean, honestly, if they make it to the third or second seed again, I wouldn't be surprised. But I just don't see a way us being like better than the Miami Heat or the Philadelphia 76ers, especially with the new additions that they've made. Um, I just think it's going to be like one of those seasons where they're going to. I mean, the team should still scare them. They still should be beware of the Raptors because if you're not paying attention, they're going to go for your throat. That's just the way that the Raptors are, especially with the motivated Toronto Raptors who, like people like myself, are kind of doubting them again. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm doubting them as a tool, as kind of like a tactic to make sure that they do good this year because apparently the Raptors play best when they're doubted, and I guess that's kind of like the whole thing about the Toronto Raptors. Everyone doubts them, but they always just overexceed expectations, and I could see that happening, especially because I'm hoping Siakam has a bounce back year, Van Vliet gets better, Norm keeps his production from last year. And like I said, Anunoby, I mean, he's shown, I mean, probably not game 2, but game 1 of the preseason, he looked really good. He looked really good, and I'm hoping that we could see some like sort of production like that in the regular season, maybe close to 15 points a game or something like that, hopefully. But I just think that the Raptors just don't have the talent. But like I said, I really hope they prove me wrong because I still think this team is really good, but the East is kind of like is really good as well. So I have the Raptors coming in sixth this year. Let's move on to number 5, and I have the Miami Heat, another surprising team here. I have the Miami Heat coming in the 5th seed of the East. I have them going 47-25. Jimmy Butler is the most valuable player, and the player to watch is Tyler Hero. I just think that the Miami Heat is just one of those teams who will have a good regular season, but when they're going to show their true powers is in the playoffs. I really do believe that. I mean, they have the continuity from the players from last year. Bam, Hero, Butler, Dragic, all them players from the finals team last year. And I'm really excited to see the improvement of players such as Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo. And they also retooled their bench. They brought in people like Avery Bradley. They brought in Mo Harkless, I believe. I think this team is going to be still good, but I just think that in the regular season, is where they're kind of gonna not really slow down, but I just don't think they're going to be as good as a regular season team. And I think it's going to. I mean, they showed us last year. I mean, before the bubble. I mean, the bubble could have been just the perfect scenario for that team, but before the bubble, they were the 5th seed. There's a reason they were the 5th seed. They just having a Jimmy Butler led team just doesn't really last long in a regular season. But at the same time, these guys are improving. If they go higher, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But um, I still have them as maybe a dark horse contender because I think a lot of people are gonna have them kind of low again. But Miami's just gonna work their butts off to really try and go deep in the playoffs once again. So yeah, I have them fifth, but I still think that they can still make some noise in the playoffs if and when they get there. Now, this is another like talking point I wanted to discuss here because there has been rumors that the Heat are willing to trade their golden boy Tyler Hero to the Rockets if they can get James Harden. I think that's really interesting, especially last year as because Pat Riley was talking about how Tyler Hero was kind of untouchable in the Miami Heat um, organization. They thought he was untouchable, but I mean it's James Harden, so it kind of makes sense why you're like, okay, maybe if we can get the best shooting guard in the league, maybe that would be enough for us to like trade our young star. And but the question is, if they add James Harden to their team, will they be title contenders? I would say yeah. I think that would improve their chances for sure. I mean, having a Jimmy Butler focus on defense, which he loves to do, and Harden being probably the best offensive player, top three offensive player of this generation, if you combine those two players, I mean, who knows what they could do? You can have Harden, facilitating the ball as well. Jimmy Butler not having to worry too much on the offensive end, doing his thing on the defensive end. I think that could be a really scary team. But are the Heat willing to give up all their depth to do that? I'm not sure. And Harden still wants to do that trade, so it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes and what type of situation he'll be a part of, and or just a package that comes in return for that. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what type of moves that the Heat may make this upcoming season. But at this very moment, I have them going fifth. So yeah, fifth place, Miami Heat. Now on to who I think will be the fourth seed in the East, and it's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. I have them going 48-24. Ben Simmons is their MVP, and their player to watch is Tobias Harris. What I liked what they did on this offseason was they addressed their biggest need, which was three-point shooting. With the new management bringing in Daryl Morey and the new coaching, bringing in Doc Rivers, I believe that they will at least get closer to what we thought they could have been last year. Sure, they lost some talent in Josh Richardson and Al Horford, but they got players that they needed. Danny Green, Seth Curry, just shooting. They just got more shooting, which is the absolute must needed that they needed, to be completely honest. Because at some points last year, Al Horford was unplayable because how can you have a lineup with Richardson, Simmons, Harris, Horford, and Embiid expect not to have any spacing? I don't know what they were trying to do last year. I was convinced, if you guys remember last year, I had them winning, not winning the NBA Finals, but going to the NBA Finals. Winning MVP was Joel Embiid, and Brett Brown was going to be the coach of the year. I was very convinced that I thought that they were going to be a very good team. But like they've always done, they've kind of underachieved and they've kind of disappointed. And sure, people are still going to be doubting the Simmons and Embiid combo. But I think that with the shooters around them now, I think, and with Tobias Harris especially, bringing in a coach where he had his best season with the LA Clippers, he was averaging over 20 points a game. And he did this under Doc Rivers, and so hopefully he can get the best out of Tobias as well. But I think with Simmons and Embiid still there, they're two top 20 players in my opinion. I just think that they'll be good enough. They just are. They have two All NBA type players who are elite in their own ways, and you have this type of roster around them. I think that they're going to be good. If things go well, maybe they might jump up to maybe the third or second seed as well. But I'm going to pump the brakes there, and I'll say they will come in fourth place. So yeah, I like the way they set up their roster this year, but I have them coming in fourth. Let's move on to the third seed, and we're going to be talking about the Brooklyn Nets. I have them going third in the East, 52-20 record, MVP Kevin Durant, player to watch Karis LeVert. They're going to be title contenders. When you have Kyrie and KD on the same team, that type of duo will just elevate you to title contendership. Plain and simple. That's all it is. But we've seen this last year with the Clippers. Things are not going to be smooth sailing all season, especially with Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert, who had a prominent role in their playoff run last year. It's gonna be tough for them to kind of like take a step back, you know. And although Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are both, um, you know, top 10, top 12 players in this league, it's gonna be tough, especially since LeVert and Dinwiddie have been accustomed to it. But if they put things together, which I think they will do kind of a better job here, especially with Steve Nash there with D'Antoni and Stoudemire, I think it'll work better. And it may take a while. That's why I have them kind of a bit lower than some people do. But I still think it'll work out eventually. Because, I mean, I talked about how talent kind of doesn't like always translate to fit. But when you have all these different shot creators on your team, it's kind of a good problem to have, you know. Karis LeVert, Dinwiddie, both pretty good at it, and then Kyrie and KD are elite tier at it. So they have a lot of scoring options. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they trade for a third star as well using those assets, but at the same time, I think they're still highly talented up and down their roster. I didn't even mention Joe Harris, who I think is a very good player for that type of system. I think there's going to be a fun team to watch. They're going to be really good, and once they start to figure things out as a team, we're definitely going to be talking about them as one of those title favorites in the East. So yeah, the Brooklyn Nets, I have them coming in third. Before I move on to the final two teams, I do want to give my thoughts on the Kyrie Irving situation with him in the media. He was basically saying that he wasn't going to do media for the first week of the preseason, and people started batching him on and stuff like that. And then he came out with a comment saying, "Look, I don't want to talk to media because I don't deal with pawns." And I really just don't like the way Kyrie Irving has already started off this season. I think he's an extremely talented player, top two point guard in the league at his very best. But you don't keep doing this. This is just gonna cause more eyes on the Brooklyn Nets, and for the bad reasons. And I just think it just gives him a sense of entitlement. Doing media is part of your duty as an NBA player. It's in your contract. Now you can say whatever you want to the media. You don't have to give them anything. You really don't. But they're here. They're the ones, promoting the product. They're the one that's giving you money, giving you the viewership. But that's just not how Kyrie's perceiving it, and I think it's kind of disgusting sometimes the way he goes about these things. Kevin Love even talked about it before, saying that's just blatant disrespect. Like Kyrie Irving, when he was talking about the media, was basically saying that, look, I'm making more money than you. One of the top NBA players. I'm better than you, and that's just not the case. We're all human, and just because you have an occupation or you're making more money than someone doesn't mean that you're better. Plain and simple. And Kyrie Irving is definitely giving off that vibe. He's kind of spoiled and stuff like that. He always wants to think that he's thinking outside the box, a deep thinker. But there's just some points where you're just look, man, that's just pure disrespect, and this is just one of those instances. So hopefully Kyrie can firstly get to do his media. I mean, Damian Lillard said on his live that he should be doing it, and hopefully he could finally find some sort of mix with these guys on the Brooklyn Nets, because if he continues to do what Kyrie Irving does, I mean, I could see this, see what happened in Boston and stuff, and see it happening again here. So yeah, I mean, hopefully everything goes well. But man, Kyrie, sometimes it's better just not to talk. But talk to the media. Talk to the media. Let's move on to number two in the East, and I think this is a great transition because this team had Kyrie before, and now I have them finishing over Kyrie in the standings. I have the Boston Celtics. I have them going 54-18, MVP being Jason Tatum, and their player to watch being Kemba Walker. I think last year was a kind of a rough ending, especially because they got kind of destroyed by the Heat in that series. But I think they'll bounce back. They'll definitely bounce back. They lost Gordon Hayward, but they still have their core group of guys again. I expect Tatum to elevate into the superstar sphere this year. And I think last year's misfortune is just going to motivate them. I really do. I mean, people are still going to be questioning Kemba Walker and how he's going to do because he kind of disappointed in the playoffs. But I think after a year, I think they've kind of noted each other's tendencies. They play with each other enough, and I think that they will be right in the mix to be title contenders and just competing for that top spot in the East. I mean, I still don't like the fact that they really didn't upgrade their center position. Shirley Brown, Tristan Thompson, but like I said before, doesn't give much different than what Tice gives you on the defensive end. And I just think this team will be really fun, really good, and I think that they'll just be like a awesome team, especially with the coaching and Brad Stevens. Um, I think that this is going to be a really good team, and they're going to be like up there in the East. So, second place in the East, I have the Boston Celtics. Now let's go on to number one, and with all the teams left, even before the Giannis extension, I still had the Milwaukee Bucks number one in the East. I have them going 59-13, MVP being Giannis Antetokounmpo, and the coach and the player to watch. It's not really a player, but it's a coach, and it's Mike Budenholzer. I expect them to win the East, just like the last 2 years. I mean, they've proven that they're a really good regular season team, especially on the defensive end. They're always up there among the elite in terms of defense. I mean, not just the elite in the league, but the elite in NBA history. And I think that Giannis will still put up those MVP numbers, whether he wins MVP or not. We're going to have to wait and see, but he'll still put up massive numbers. And like I said, they're just going to dominate the regular season. But the thing about the Bucks, will they get it done in the playoffs? That's the big question now. Everyone is expecting the Bucks to be near the top of the East, if not the top of the East. But can they get it done in the playoffs? I mean, it used to be now or never for the Bucks, but they just re-signed Giannis, which I'll be talking about very shortly. But this is probably do or die for Mike Budenholzer. If they don't get significantly better or even get close, I mean, they need to be at the very least in a close um, West Eastern Conference Final series, a very close one. It has to go 7 games if they're going to lose. That's the minimum. That's the minimum they have to reach to show like good growth. And if not, I think they really have to get rid of Mike Budenholzer. I mean, he's the one who has to make the adjustments, and he hasn't really done that, especially last year in the playoffs, where I say last year, but it was only a couple months ago. But um, yeah, he just didn't make the adjustments needed. He played like 10 or 11 guys in the playoffs, and he just wasn't playing his best guys enough minutes, and he needs to make those type of adjustments, especially in the playoffs when stars win you matches, and they just couldn't get it done. They basically got swept by the Heat, even though Chris Middleton had that great game in Game 4 to kind of avoid the sweep. But at the same time, Mike Budenholzer is going to need to do a better job coaching. I mean, we know he's a great regular season coach, but what can he do for us in the playoffs? He's already disappointed with the Hawks, and now he's on the last 2 years with the Bucks. So it's really going to be interesting to see how the season goes for the Bucks. But I think all eyes now that Giannis is re-signed, is towards Mike Budenholzer to see if he's going to be the right coach to help bring them to the promised land. But before we sign off, we have to talk about this Giannis extension. He signed a 5-year, $228 million deal to remain with the Milwaukee Bucks, Supermax deal. I think this is great. As a Raptor fan, was I kind of salty at the initial report? Yes. I didn't think that the Raptors had a great chance to take Giannis, but it's one of those things where you're like, Masai could do crazy things. Who knows what could happen? But I'm happy for them. I'm happy for Milwaukee. I'm happy for small markets in general. That someone of a caliber like Giannis Antetokounmpo, the back-to-back MVP, top 5 player in this league, was committed to stay with a small market team, because these type of scenarios are come so often, not often at all, really. I mean, the last player who who felt like a lifer, as part of a team was Russell Westbrook, and he got traded away. But in terms of just those lifers and Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, R.I.P. But they're just those are kind of all big markets, bar maybe San Antonio. But it's good to see someone like Giannis, who has dominated over the league the past few years, stay true to his roots and stay with the Milwaukee Bucks. I know if Bucks fans are over the moon. I know the casual NBA fans probably gonna look at this, and say why doesn't he go to a bigger market and stuff like that? It'll be better for him. But that's just not how Giannis is, as I like to look at things. I mean, Giannis is all about loyalty. He's all about trying to do things the right way, and he felt that this is the best thing to do for his career. And I'm just happy to see this type of scenario happen for, these small market teams, because if he moved to a big market, say, a Miami or something like that, I think this could have been like troublesome for small markets. You're like, man, we can hit a superstar in a draft, but if it's gonna be tough because like no not a lot of players go to small markets and stuff like that, especially in free agency, and it's just harder to maintain like a superstar's morality. So it's great that they brought back Giannis. I'm happy he resigned with the Bucks. Now I'm just interested to see how this next 5 years will go. Does that mean he'll completely go through the 5 years, as we've seen in the NBA? Probably not, but if anyone's probably gonna do it, it's gonna be Giannis. I really do believe that. I'm happy for Milwaukee. I'm happy for the league. Happy for small markets, and I'm happy for him. I mean, check out a story. Hopefully, that movie's gonna come out soon about Giannis. But he's gone through a lot. He's gone through so much. Basically homeless and all that, and now he's like a top 5 player in the NBA, having the biggest contract in NBA history. I'm so proud of him, and I cannot wait to see how it's gonna go over the next few seasons for him and for the Milwaukee Bucks. But it doesn't mean that the Bucks need to stop trying building around him all because this is all about trying to like make sure that they're as competitive as possible as long as they have him in his prime. So Milwaukee, please don't waste this. Please don't. You have a once in a generational type player. Make sure he stays. And I think this is where we're going to end today's podcast. Thank you guys for watching or listening. Remember to show love on all the podcast channels. Like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And remember to follow @TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for great content. I'm going to be back on Monday previewing the first few games of the regular season. And I have a small plan in mind for the Christmas episode, so please be on the lookout for that. I think it's going to be a really fun episode, so yeah, be on the lookout for that. And yeah, thank you guys for all your support. We are almost reaching 2,000 downloads on this podcast, which is pretty crazy, especially because back in March, we were under 200, so over 1,800 downloads. I really do appreciate y'all. And yeah, I just cannot wait for this upcoming NBA season. Preseason still going on, so keep watching for that. And yeah, let's get down to some NBA basketball. But yeah, I'm going to be signing off. Hope you all have a fantastic day. Take it easy, guys. Peace.